Mr. Isaac,
Yes.
do we have a way that we can note how many people watch council meeting live?
I don't believe we can do that. I know you asked Wayne that, I think it was last week, to look into that. We are looking into that, but I don't think there is a way that we know. Oh, Eric may have an answer to that. Let's see. Well, he's probably not. But anyway, I'll check into that, Mayor. I think we can frankly look at the number of number of people or number of people that are on. We might be able to tell it that way. Eric, do you know?
I've got the sound now. Yeah, that's correct. We can tell the number of people who are viewing our YouTube channel, sir.
Okay, okay, while it's going out live.
Yes.
Okay, it looks like, I think I saw everyone online. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, everyone is back. So, well, let's see. I just need to confirm. I see pictures of a number of you. Tom Hune and Lars, you're there.
That's not my picture. I'm just holding very still.
Oh, okay. Okay, and Tom is there, and Jake, I assume, is there.
Yes, I'm here.
Anyway, okay, great. Then let's go ahead with the rest of our agenda for our study meeting. Let's see, we have our minutes of September 15th is next on our agenda. So if I could get a motion on the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes of September 15th.
Second?
Okay, hearing no further comments, then without objection, we will consider the minutes approved. Hearing no objections, that makes it unanimous. Okay, we go on to review our meeting for later tonight. Our meeting, we think, may be brief, but we never know. There are only 2 items on our agenda. Excuse me, 2 action items besides the minutes and the like. And so there were no changes to that agenda. Does anyone have any comments or anything for that meeting? Hearing none. We'll next go to the public hearing that's scheduled for next week. Whoop, did someone have a comment there? Oh, we'll go to our public hearing scheduled for next week, which we'll have 2. The first one is the reopening of the budget for our current year. And it appears like there's a lot there and a lot of money, but much of it is fairly routine. So Mr. Welch, I believe, is going to talk to us about this. So we'll turn the time to him as soon as he unmutes his microphone.
Thank you for the notice. Appreciate it, Mayor and Council. As the Mayor had mentioned, this is our, we have a quarterly budget opening where we go in and we make revisions to the budget that was originally adopted for operating the city. The majority of these revisions have to do with projects that were started either last year or in previous years that are continuing on. Some of them will be completed this year. Some of them possibly will run on a little bit longer. So the majority of those are rollovers of projects. Many of those projects are in our CIP fund. There are also rollovers of grants and lease proceeds for projects that are ongoing, grants that were not expended from the previous years, that we're still spending the money on the authorized purposes for which those grants were awarded. The majority of those, as I mentioned, are in CIP and for capital projects. There's a number of projects as you go through them. There's Public Works and Parks Building, which is just about done, if not completed now. There's Fairborn Station Plaza construction. There's a number of roads projects and various other construction projects that you're welcome to go down and go through. The next ones are new grants in the category of new awards that have come to the city. We have some grants that were for the Victims Assistance Program that cover the salaries and benefits of our excellent Victims Assistance Program. And then we also have a housing grant for the victims of crimes. There's also a grant, emergency management systems grant for the fire department for supplies from the state of Utah, and they've been very successful in applying for these funds and using them. There's a National Recreation and Parks Association grant, which you actually reviewed a couple of weeks ago. Nancy was very pleased to bring that to your attention, that of all the applicants, they were one that were chosen and to be funded at this kind of a level. The other items are things that we have donations that came in for the My Hometown projects. We also had money that the city felt like that was a project that they needed to contribute to. We have lease proceeds to cover energy projects. There's $1 million, that's probably the biggest one under the other items, that is set aside for COVID-19 response expenditures, which continue. And that was the initial budget that was recommended to cover a lot of the supplies and the items which are becoming necessary as our world of operations have changed. In addition to that, of note, we've had an increase in the Valley Emergency Communications Center operations assessment of $156,000. That's an obligation we have as our membership with VEC to cover their operations costs. And then the Maverick Center energy efficiency projects. You'll recall that there are significant projects being done over there to increase their energy efficiency. When they got into those projects, they found that, as this often happens, there are a number of symbiotic systems that needed to be replaced at the same time. Otherwise, it would have reduced the efficiency and the effectiveness of those energy replacement projects. So these became necessary to do at this time. Otherwise, we probably would have had to take out some of the equipment that we just barely put in. So that's one of those things we found out as the Maverick Center projects were progressing. So that's the overview of the budget openings, and I'd be happy to entertain any specific questions you might have or any process review.
Perhaps for anyone who might be listening in, who might raise a question about the amount of funds here that we're approving, many of these are contractual obligations that were entered into in a prior year, or in the case of leases where we entered into those and need to follow through on them. We still recognize that our budget is still in good shape, even in spite of the economic downturn. But we are not here just looking to spend a whole bunch of money. Some of this money, and I'll point out the COVID-19 response funds, that was money that was, of course, allocated to us to deal with many issues and is restricted in what it can be spent for. In other words, we can't take that to just cover anything else in our budget. It's very narrow, well, significantly narrow as to what those funds can be used for. So although there is a large number of items here and a fair amount of money, these are not things that we can easily undo. There would be significant ramifications, such as stopping a project in the middle, which would create problems not only for the contractor, but for us as well if we didn't follow through on that. So that's enough for that. So questions and comments from the council? Not hearing any comments or questions. Then, Jim, great job.
Thank you.
Big, long list and very few questions, so thank you. With that, then, we go to the next item on our agenda. The second public hearing scheduled for next week. This is application, the prior one was ordinance 20-41. Should have said that at the start, but now we're going to review application Z-7 2020 filed by Hotel 5600, a limited liability corporation. And we will consider ordinance 20-42 and resolution 20-150 when this comes up on our agenda next week. So this is property at basically 2880 South, 5600 West. So with that introduction, I think this first one, I believe, is Steve Pastrick.
Yes, sir, Mayor, thank you.
Okay,
So there's really two applications involving this property on the agenda. The first one, the zone change, is a legislative decision. I'll be talking about that one. And then the application SMI 8-2020 is the subdivision, which is an administrative application, and that one will be presented by Steve Lehman. So the property again in question is 7.5 acres. You can see here on the screen the property. Actually, the majority of the property is currently zoned RM, and a portion of the property is zoned R110. So on this map, you can see a black line that separates the property. So the northeast portion is the portion zoned R110, and then the balance kind of more to the southwest is the RM portion. Just to help orient the council, so to the north, you have the Balmoral townhomes. You also have some commercial uses as you move closer to 5600 West. On the east side of 56 is all commercial. Along the south, you have some commercial uses there closer to 56. And then this particular image doesn't show up, but there's now storage units more towards the west end of the south side. And then along the west side is the basically the Mountain View corridor, which is under construction along the west side of the property. Here's just a closer up image of that, of the aerial image. To point out here, you do have a road connection on the north as well as here to the south of the property. Steve Lehman will talk more about the proposal here as far as the subdivision goes, but I included this slide simply to show that the zoning will match what the subdivision is showing. And so everything that's the closer to 5600, which is 2.1 acres, would be zoned C2. So that's the proposals. The eastern portion closest to 5600 would be zoned C2, and then the balance would either remain RM or there's a portion of the property that's changing from R110 to RM. This next image shows the proposed concept plan. So for the commercial portion out by 5600 West, they're proposing a Marriott Fairfield Inn, which is a 4-story hotel, would be out by 5600 West. They are showing a road connection through the property, which in this case is a little bit unique in that we're doing that through, or at least the proposal is to do that through a public access easement that would run through the property. This situation is a little bit unique in that the road to the north is, the existing road to the north is narrower than a typical city street. And so it's essentially matching what was done to the north. And then that road will then connect in with Glen Eagles Drive to the south. And you can see Glen Eagles also turns and extends out to 5600 West. So they would be finishing off the Glen Eagles connection or Glen Eagles Drive connection out to 5600 West, as well as extending a road connection north and south through the property. And the western portion of the property, the 5.4 acres, is proposed as townhomes. So these would be 2-story townhomes. All would have 2-car garages, alley loaded products, so garages in the rear. Thought it would be helpful to show why, from the staff perspective, the road connection we feel is important. So this is actually zoomed out a little bit further, so you can see from 31st South up to 2700 South. So if you look just west of 5600, you can see Glen Eagles Drive, which right now dead ends at this property. And then north of the property, you can see it extends up to 2700 South. So by connecting the road through this property, you'll be able to get to both 31st South and 27th South, which have signalized intersections at 5600 West. So it helps, so making that connection improves access, not only for this property, but for the neighboring properties as well. And if you look on the east side of 5600 West, you'll see that while it's a little bit further east, there's also a connection between 31st and 27th through what's called Bayberry Drive that goes through the Highbury development. And then the next image zoomed out even further that goes from 31st to 21st South. You can see, again, on the east side of 56, you've got a connection that's parallel to 5600 West that goes from 31st South all the way up to the frontage road for 21st South. And then on the west side, if we are able to make this connection, you can go from 31st South up to 2400 South, which also is a signalized intersection. So the city recently completed the bridge over the Ritter Canal, which is roughly 2500 or 2600 South. And so eventually with this road connection, you'd be able to go from 31st to 2400 South on this parallel street to 5600 West. So this image here just shows the proposed townhomes that they're wanting to construct on the western portion of the property. The development agreement that's included here does mention a couple of things they would need to change in their elevations. One is the code requires 20% brick or stone, so these would need to be modified to reflect that, and so that's specifically addressed in the agreement, as well as the pitch of the roofs would have to be increased. So those are a couple of changes that are called out in the agreement that they would need to make to the elevations. And finally, there are a number of images here just to, again, to help orient the council. So this is a shot taken from 5600 West looking to the west. So you can see the Balmoral townhomes in the distance, as well as the Mountain View corridor that's out in the distance that's under construction, that's elevated. Just another angle now here, more to the left of the image, you can see the existing connection of Glen Eagles Drive where it turns east and then connects to 5600 West. Here's just another shot looking across the site towards the existing townhomes. So here's a better shot of the connection of Glen Eagles Drive to 5600 West. So as part of this proposal, they would be finishing off the northern portion, or what's on the right, of this road connection. So you'd get the rest of the pavement and curb gutter and sidewalk installed along the north side of this road. And then as you move west would be where the road connection extends through the property. This shot was taken looking south from the existing road that essentially dead ends at the north end of the property. So you can see the existing sidewalk connection and the wall that's up against the townhomes there that are on the west. And then finally, this slide shows some of the existing fencing that's in the area. So the development agreement does address fencing. So the image in the top left shows the existing fence along the townhomes that are on the north. And so that fence would remain. The north, or excuse me, the top right image is just a closer up image of that. And the proposal here in the development agreement is that same type of fencing would be used along the west side of the new townhome development. Then along the east portion of the townhome development would be a masonry wall. And then on the south side, it would be, you can see the bottom images here. So the bottom left image is the car wash that's to the south. They just have a chain link fence. So they would be required to put up a masonry wall adjacent to the car wash. And then as you move west along that south side, there are the existing storage units. And in that case, the storage units were able to receive an exception to build essentially right on property line. Those are masonry buildings. And so in essence, the buildings themselves serve as the fence at the property line for the storage units. So that helps explain the fencing that's proposed around the perimeter of the townhome portion of the project. And then finally, to go back to the site plan, I wanted to point out a couple of items that they're in the development agreement where they're requesting an exception. So the first is, as the council remembers, last week we talked about open space and the open space requirements. So in this case, that for townhomes, the amount of the total open space required is 50%, but they're requesting an exception here that the Planning Commission recommended approval on to go to 45%. And really the main reason is that in this particular proposal, every townhome has a driveway that's deep enough to park in. So every unit has the 2-car garage as well as a driveway that you could park 2 vehicles in. In addition, they're showing some visitor parking along the street. So they have really more parking than than the recent projects that I can think of as far as townhomes go. If they were to drop some of those driveways, they would be able to meet the 50% requirement. But they felt like having extra parking would be preferable than a little bit more open space. So that's what they're proposing. The other one exception is that normally when you have commercial and residential uses next to each other, the commercial use would have a 10-foot landscaping setback along that boundary. This one's a little bit unique in that you've got a road that separates, or what's essentially accessing like a public road through the property. And so what we're suggesting here is that there would be, on the west side of the road, you would have the sidewalk and then 5 feet of landscaping before you have the masonry wall. So you'd have the masonry wall on the east edge of the townhomes, 5 feet of landscaping, the sidewalk, and then the road is the proposal there. That concludes my summary. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Steve, I have,
Oh, go ahead, Councilwoman Lang.
so what you were just speaking about, the 5-foot landscaping, is that going to be lawn or is that going to be local scape or a xeriscape situation?
We're suggesting it not be lawn. So the space between the sidewalk and the wall would be something like wood mulch and shrubs or ornamental grasses, something that's going to be drip irrigated. It's the intent there is, and we've done this in other developments, is to try to, instead of having the wall right by the sidewalk and just have it all be, pavement, the street, sidewalk and wall, there's some landscaping to soften that a little bit.
Okay. And then have you had a traffic study? Have they done a traffic study to study the outlet to the north at all?
They have not. And so it was actually earlier this year, the council amended the requirements for requesting an RM zone. And one of the standards was that a traffic study was required for projects that had 100 units or more. In this case, they have 64. So it wasn't a requirement in this case to do a traffic study.
I just drive that road an awful lot. And with that weird little knuckle where it joins on kind of the south third of Balmoral
Yes.
is a very unique road and very odd. And then your projection that they can go all the way to 2,400 or further. To get across 27, you would have to have a traffic light there.
It is.
It is almost impossible to get across that going north.
It is very busy, particularly at like rush hour. It's going to be, or the evening commute. It'll be really busy there.
Yeah. So I almost think going to the north is not a very practical. I would rather see a better entrance out onto 56th and not have them go through existing already overburdened streets and have their entrance and everything go out onto 56th. That would make it so they could only go southbound on 56th because again, going across 56th is very dangerous. So their in and out just doesn't make sense to me to use those other roads and subdivision and business park.
So maybe if I can help explain from the staff perspective why we were recommending the road connection. So right now, let's hypothetically say if we did not make the connection to the north, if someone wanted to go north on 5600, they would have to come out, to this Glen Eagles Drive connection and then make a left onto 56, which making a left on 56 can be challenging. And so the part of the thought process here is by allowing not just the townhomes, but other businesses to the south or other, people driving through on this existing street, instead of having to make a left directly onto 56, they could go up to 27th South, make a right to then turn left onto 5600 West. So it provides at least another option for going north.
Yeah. And then where are all those people that park in that other half of the road going to park once you build that into a road? Just north of Five Guys. That's always full of vehicles parked.
So on the road just to the north then.
Of Five Guys, yeah, where you're going to finish off the road and make it a full width road. Because there's not enough parking at Five Guys and Verizon and everywhere else, they park along that, just as a note.
Okay.
Steve?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe is in the east side of 5600 West, we have the Marriott Hotel before. Is that right?
Right now, there's not. So you have the. I'm trying to remember. There's the Marriott Town Place. So yes, there is, but this is a different brand, if you will, of Marriott. So this would be a Fairfield Inn, whereas the one on the east side is a Town Place.
Okay. All right. But I think that they need to have the entrance in and out for the hotel, Steve. But they're gonna lose some parking install if they do that. The entrance for the hotel on 5600 West.
They would lose a few stalls, but I think it's more an issue of with UDOT. So 5600 West is a state road. Because you have the existing road connection there directly to the south, it's likely UDOT would not grant an access because they have the connection directly to the street there to the south.
Right. Yeah.
Steve?
Yes, sir.
The road between the townhomes and the hotel, is that proposed to be a dedicated road or is that a private road through there?
So what's proposed right now is that it would be a remain private property with a public access easement. So there would be a public access easement across this property that would allow the public to drive through the site.
So that would be a recorded easement. They couldn't decide to close up and do something different.
Correct. Right. That's right. So we mentioned in the development agreement, it has that requirement that they would provide a public access easement that would be recorded.
The only thing that they're asking is really on some of the setbacks, the wall, but the main thing is the green space to reduce that in exchange for providing more parking and 4 amenities instead of 2.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Council, any further questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll go on to our resolutions, item 7. And thank thee for that information as we prepare for this for next week.
Thank you.
Our next 3 resolutions are actually related. Eric is going to present these and we'll do them in order, I think, just without my introduction. Resolutions 20-151, 152, and 153. Because these are for the purchase of computer equipment, communications equipment, and satellite communications, and they are all related. And so, Eric, we'll let you take it from there.
Thank you, sir. I come to the City Council in greetings tonight, not as your city attorney, but as the logistics section chief for the emergency management of the COVID pandemic that we are currently in. And as the mayor mentioned earlier, all 3 of these items have passed the criteria mentioned before in the COVID and CARES Act funding. That is, they are necessary for the continued management of the crisis, as well as meeting all the other requirements that we need to do to purchase items. So I'm going to go through all of them. The first are more boring, and that is, but probably the most necessary, and that is just a bunch of computers and phones in order to continue our people working both from home and from here. When we, at the peak of our work from home around March and April, we had about 285 people working from home. And, you know, in those first few weeks, we were hauling great big monitors and desktop computers out to people's houses and getting them set up on there. And it was really quite an effort to get that done. As we continue to move along in the pandemic, and as it appears we might be entering a second fall wave that was predicted, we just want to keep our equipment up to date, to keep the services to residents at the high level that they are used to and that we need to provide to them. To that point, we're asking for approval of, as you can see on this item, a bunch of different kind of computers, both desktop computers that are very light and small. They're the kind we have in the council chambers here, as well as some laptops, some docking stations, some monitors, and then some phone devices for our emergency command posts in case networks go down or phones go down within the city or elsewhere. Those are the Fortinet phone devices. So that's the first item. The second item is kind of the next layer. So computers, obviously, if all the networks are up and running and everything's going, that's great. The next layer of communication, if our computers go out and if our phones go out, are these 800 megahertz radios. Now, these radios are quite expensive. They look kind of like your kid's walkie-talkie or the things you use for camping or something like that, but they're actually very high-tech piece of equipment and very expensive. And these are set up on repeaters from Brigham City to St. George. And I've personally tested them all the way up to about Brigham City, Tremonton area. And they work between a series of repeaters all up and down the Wasatch Front. So in order to maintain communications between command staff, police, fire, and some secondary command structures, we're recommending that we purchase more of these, as well as some of the spare batteries and little microphone things that go along with those. They're actually pretty invaluable because they always work. They'll find, if one repeater goes out, they'll find another repeater. We hit the repeater all the way out in Promontory sometimes, up in the mountains around here and everywhere else, and they're just really quite useful. The third set of items are what I've got in front of me here, and these are some satellite communication items. When radios, internet, and phones don't work, we have to be able to communicate with each other somehow, both in the short term and in the little bit longer term. And that's why we have 3 different kinds of satellite equipment. This little short puck thing that I've got right here will allow you to make phone calls from your iPhone or Android phone. This slightly bigger satellite dish has to be pointed to find the satellites, but once you point it, you can get some data on that, so you can actually send emails. I've successfully sent test emergency declarations, photographs, that kind of thing on that. And then finally, the big satellite is this guy here, which will actually hook several computers up to it, and we can use that at emergency command posts, or from remote locations, or even here if the internet, phones, and computers aren't working. And then, of course, along with that is satellite service, which is also not cheap. They give us a certain amount every month just to use and to be able to test, but the service, hourly services, is like the old days. We were talking today about long distance calls. That's the kind of cost that you incur by using these satellites too much. I also just did want to point out behind me, this is not part of the purchases tonight, but as part of our emergency kit, we've been getting some of these Goal Zero batteries, which can power laptops and iPhones and iPads, and even bigger items. For a while, we actually powered some great big VHF radios with them today during some testing. And so we're distributing these out to some key emergency personnel to always have power and communications during COVID and other future emergencies. So no, it's okay. That is my report on those 3 items tonight, sir.
Eric, would you clarify the source of the funds and who set the requirements, just
Yes,
so
sir.
that the public's aware of that?
Yes, sir. The CARES funding criteria that I mentioned at the beginning is the funding that the federal government is providing to municipalities and through the counties and the states, which has a kind of rigorous criteria that you have to meet in order to qualify for that spending. And in our review of these items, they do meet it.
Yeah. And if it's spent for anything that doesn't meet that criteria, obviously they'll want the money back.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Council, questions, comments?
Couple of questions, Mayor.
Yes.
Eric, what's the utility and necessity of this equipment absent a pandemic, absent an earthquake, absent something that, has so many people working at home? Is this going to be useful to us in the normal course of business? Or is this like the 300 pounds of red wheat my parents had in their basement for 40 years that was just in case?
No, it's very useful during the work at home COVID pandemic, of course, as I've mentioned, but it's useful anytime. Like I said, the radios are up 99% of the time. Anytime any kind of phone or internet is down, we can immediately go to these radios. Satellites, things would have to be pretty bad if the satellite communications weren't working. So again, anytime you have a power outage, let's even say a windstorm that knocked our power out, there go our servers, there go our internal stuff in the city. This is the kind of stuff that we would use for any of those applications. And even today, just by way of example, while waiting for the communications test I mentioned, I was able to send several emails out and take care of a lot of business using one of these battery powered machines and the data on this. The bottom line is it'll keep us working all the time, I guess.
So, it's not something that we needed enough to buy before we got the CARES funds, right?
I think it would have been useful before the CARES funds.
Okay, so with all technology, it seems like it's obsolete as soon as we get it. So what would be the expected usefulness of it?
So great, the computers are just going to have their normal expected usefulness. We're probably talking a 4-year turnover on that. The satellite equipment is actually pretty robust in terms of how long it lasts. We have some satellite phones that we were using today that are about 12 years old, and they still work. And they still work. So they build these things to last a little longer. As far as the radios, I think we've been on the 800 megahertz radios for about 5 or 6 years. And so I think the more expensive stuff has a more robust time frame. The computers are just going to be computers, and they're going to have that same kind of 4-year time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey,
Eric,
Eric, can I
before
ask you one question?
Hold on.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So your satellite booster that will help you if the internet's down and the power's off, how many computers will that take care of? Or will it just mainly to be keep our server up and really not a lot of use with, like 100 employees on their computers?
Right. Yeah. You would never, even on this big one, you would never be able to get 100 employees. This would be for the first probably day of an emergency or something like that. If you strung a couple of these together, you could probably get 20 or 30 people working at most on the very big one. The smaller ones are kind of more remote locations, maybe 4 people, and the little tiny ones is probably single use. So you couldn't run a city long term on the satellite.
Okay, well, some of the emergencies are lasting a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, other than the pandemic. So would those be adequate for that? For the essential people that need them?
They would be adequate for the 20 or 30 command kind of essential people. They would keep running for that period of time. But yeah, if we're talking about, let's see, well, my own prosecutors, for example, if an emergency extended into the 10th or 20th day, oh, I just turned that on and that's not good. If you got into the 20th day on for somebody like that, yeah, we'd be in some trouble, and we wouldn't be able to help them with this stuff. Hopefully by the end of 20 days, we'd have some kind of internet service back for people like the prosecutors. Is that?
And then where will they be stored?
So we've got an inventory system and a couple storage units, a couple storage closets down
Okay.
in the basement of City Hall next to the EOC. And so what we'll do is we'll have barcodes on them, and we'll scan them, and that will be like the in and out inventory system.
So these aren't used for personal use. I'm going to go on vacation. I want good reception. I'm going to take one of these with me. These are only for emergency use.
These are for emergency use. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Eric, perhaps if I misspeak here, you correct the statements that I make, but I think the concept with this money was that many cities were in the middle of a pandemic. There was an economic downturn. They were having difficulties and didn't have the correct emergency equipment. So the federal government stepped in and allocated these funds with the expectation that emergency equipment and other things that were needed, these funds would be available for to help us get through this time. It was recognized that cities were not in a position to do that, many of them. And so, you know, those correct statements?
Yes, sir. That's exactly right. And frankly, with this COVID fund, we've purchased a lot of things that the council doesn't see because they're below the council threshold. But this is where we're buying all the masks for our first responders, all the gloves, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And as far as the politics of it and whether we should or shouldn't spend it, why the federal government made that decision, and the money is spent and is allocated out across the country. And it was a lot of money. And that's not the only thing. There are actually other funds out there as well related to the pandemic. Loans to businesses and things like that. So Eric, haven't heard anyone else bring up anything else. So hearing nothing else, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
when Steve Pastrick introduced item B, he mentioned that Steve Lehman would be addressing part of that, and we did not hear from him. I don't know if that was covered by Steve Pastrick or missed or needed, but I thought I'd bring
Now,
that up.
it's actually item 8A, which will be the second item we'll deal with at this point.
Okay. I didn't look that
It's
far.
there. Yeah, we're going to cover one other thing first and then address that issue, okay?
Put my
So
glasses.
we stay on our agenda. Next, new business, application SMI-7-2020. Requesting final plat approval for property at 6090 West, 3500 South. And I assume Mr. Lehman will do this one, and then we'll get to the next one.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve Lehman with the Community Development Department. This is a request from Felix Correa regarding property on the north side of 3500 South at approximately 6090 West. This is a 1 acre piece of property, as you can see highlighted in red. Property to the east and to the north, and even the one lot to the west, is part of the Meadow Breeze subdivision, subdivision that was done by our former Governor Bangerter many years ago. We could go to the next slide. This is just a little bit of a zoomed in version. You'll see that the property is vacant. To our knowledge, this property has not had a dwelling on it for many, many years. There may have been an old pioneer home back in the day, but it's been vacant really ever since Meadow Breeze was platted in the early 2000s. We can go to the next slide. We just took a couple of photos for the property to give you a feel. This is looking from the south side of 3500 South, looking to the north. There is an existing drive approach that comes in off of 3500. That will be removed and relocated a little bit further to the west, just in front of that large tree for a new drive, a new private drive. The next slide is just an illustration looking to the east, where you'll see those homes that were platted as part of Meadow Breeze. And then the last slide is of the subdivision plat itself. So what is being proposed here is a 3-lot subdivision. The property is 1 acre in size, and the access will be gained on 3500 South from a private street. You'll see that there is a unique configuration to this street that is due to the necessity for fire turnaround. So it's a hammerhead configuration, what we call that. So all lots will gain access from that road. So the front lot will not have its own independent access on 3500. That home could front 3500, but it would gain its access from the private drive. Lots here range in size from just under 10,000 square feet, and the 2 lots that are in the back, minus the private drive, are 12,000 square feet. So all 3 homes will be built to our current housing standard. There is no groundwater problem here, so all homes will have the ability to have basements as well. And that is our report.
Council?
Steve, this is purely administrative, is it? It meets all our requirements?
Yes, sir.
Hearing no further comments, we'll move to the next one, which is application SMI-8 2020, filed by Steve Lovell at 2880 South, 5600 West. And this is the one you were waiting for, Councilman Bueller. Steve Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. Not my pictures, so let's have Eric reboot that. So this is in follow-up to the presentation that Steve Pastrick gave to you just a little bit ago. This application simply divides the property into 2 pieces. So you're familiar with the location, once again, just south of Balmoral, north of Colt Plaza, phase 2, and then just south of the Lighthouse Plaza on 5600 West. The next slide is just the same version you saw earlier, just a zoomed in version. And then the next, we did take a couple of slides. Both Steve and I have used the same one, so we won't spend a lot of time on these unless the council has questions. This is looking from the east side of 56. This is the roadway that is called Glen Eagles. That will be the lighter patch of asphalt will be that portion that will be dedicated and improved. And then the next slide is looking from the dead end street coming out of the Balmoral townhomes. And the last slide is the subdivision plat itself. So this application is to divide the 2 pieces of property. So the C2 zoning on the east side adjacent to 5600 West, and the west portion that would be for townhomes should the council approve the rezone application. The connection between the Balmoral stub and Colt Plaza, as Councilman Bueller had asked previously, is going to be via a public access easement, and that will be recorded with the subdivision plat. We've made note of that with the developer, have discussed that with the Public Works Department, and that is an alternative that seems to be acceptable to the city engineer. So in summary, this application creates the 2 lots for the hotel and for the future townhomes, should this rezone be approved. That application for the townhomes would come back for city council review at a time and place in the future, should the rezone be approved. And that is our report.
Thank you, council.
So Steve, if the zone change fails, then does this fail of necessity or could be passed still? Is it be withdrawn? What would happen then?
That's a good question. So the subdivision itself could still be, well, actually, there is a small portion that is zoned R110, as Steve mentioned. So if the rezone application was denied, we would probably withhold the subdivision application because certainly the property could develop in another fashion. There's no sense moving forward with an application that doesn't fit the rezone.
But if the zoning passes, is this purely administrative then? It meets all the requirements?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Hearing no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Lehman. With
Thank
that,
you.
then we'll move to our consent agenda. We have two items there. Resolution 20-154. This is authorizing the city to accept a warranty deed. And this one is on the north side of 201 for right-of-way. And so this one of the routine items. If you have more questions, we'll do those. But resolution 20-155, this is one of those on the asphalt overlay project in order to meet ADA requirements, a right-of-way purchase agreement, quitclaim deed, temporary construction easement at 2784 West, 3835 South. Anyone have questions they want staff to answer on these? Hearing none, we go to 10, our communications. We have our COVID-19 update. Any questions there? Should have gotten that information. I haven't checked my email, so I haven't looked at it yet. Hearing none, council calendar, any questions there?
Yes, Mayor.
Hearing none.
Mayor,
Yes.
we do have on the calendar arsenic and old lace coming up. Wonder if we'll receive some additional information on that. And of course, we've got Paul with us tonight, so maybe he can tell us, will we be invited to that? Is there a night for us? Should we, with social distancing, is there a lottery for tickets? How would we proceed if we want to be part of that?
Thank you, Councilman. Yes, I'll text you tonight the link to get your tickets. It's not a special way to get tickets, but obviously we're going to get you guys tickets. So you'll have to go through the same process, but they're essentially all of them have been put aside for you. The show will begin on October 1st. It looks really, really good. And I'll send you not only that link for the tickets, but also send you the link for the advertisement of it. So I'll do that tonight as soon as we get off.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
You bet.
Hearing no further questions on the calendar, we go to potential future agenda items. Does anyone have anything?
I do, Mayor.
Yes.
I don't know if that was me or somebody else. It was like I heard an echo.
You can go. I'll go after you, Steve.
Oh, it was Jake. Well, thank you, Jake. Just recently returned from Peachwood Park, and I'll bring it up again. Mentioned this when we looked at the new playground design, but we have space, and I think we ought to consider putting in some angled parking on Peachwood Drive so that there is access to the park for people in their vans, especially handicap spaces. All they can do right now is pull up along the curb. There's not room for very many of them, and no handicap designated spaces. I think we ought to take another look at that and see when we can afford to make those improvements.
Okay. And then, was that all, Councilman Bueller?
Yes.
Okay, Councilman Fitisimanu?
Hi. Yeah. I don't know if this necessarily needs to be a formal agenda item or even a communication, but I do appreciate the weekly COVID-19 updates, the information about the cases and the case rates and how they impact our employees is very helpful. But I was hoping to get maybe a little bit more information on, this is actually a little peripheral to what was presented earlier about emergencies and adapting to staff, et cetera, people working at home. So I'd love to get a little bit more info on how that's impacted our staff, if we have any positions, for example, that can potentially remain at home. I mean, that's happened in my own agency where there are folks who used to come into the office, and we've realized that, you know what, they do just great. They're super productive at home, and we save a lot of money with them not having to have office space. So any of those kind of logistic considerations with our workforce and how we've adapted, that would be interesting to me to hear. And maybe that can be summed up in an email too. But yeah, that's something I'd like to hear about.
Absolutely. We can get that to you right away. Actually, the analysis of people working from home is always being conducted. All the departments are looking at that in a pretty serious way. And so that's another reason why we've begun to purchase some equipment that we can have some of these employees, frankly, remain at home. So, yep, that's a big issue, Councilman, and I'll be glad to get that report to you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Lang, were you?
Yes,
Okay.
I was just waiting. So last week during study session, a gentleman brought up the towing rotation question as to if we're going to lessen how many we have. I would like a communication item that explains that to us, if we're going to do it, why we're going to do it, so forth. And then my other thing is parking on 3100 South, especially by the trailer park that's down here around 4200 West. The occupants of the trailer park are parking on 3100 South along the road, and there's numerous houses that do not have a visual, they don't have enough visual space to be able to see if it's safe for them to back out of their own driveway or not. So I would like to see about putting forth an ordinance for roads that are posted more than 35 miles an hour, that you cannot park within 15 feet of a driveway. And so I would just like staff to look at that and see. I received phone calls when I forwarded those on. It was told to me that they have an overwhelming amount of phone calls concerning this. There's a lot of residents who feel it's not safe to get in and out of their driveways. And so that's I would just
Very
like to
good.
see if we could put an ordinance together.
Well,
I can take that. Go ahead, sir.
Before we do an ordinance, let's have the communication, the discussion. And
Okay.
and I would like to hear as well, what would be the justification maybe for extending that to 4 lanes so that we have that all the way up and down 3100 South. There are people opposed to that. There are people supportive of it. But we ought to just include that in the discussion.
That's a good idea, to see what the practicality of that is, because it's already built. It's just be striping, so there wouldn't be a burdensome cost.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. I'll be glad to get that done as well. We'll make that a communications item then. That's what's.
Were there any others? I have a minor item to bring up. It's more of a housekeeping item. Just a little clarification on in our regular meetings where we have a moment there where you are listening right now to the police videos. I want to make sure that it's clear to the council members that each of you can still request your time. We would suggest that it be only once every 7 opportunities for it. But even that can be modified. We've done that before when someone was absent, someone stepped in, and not even when it was a trade, they just stepped in and did it. And though we may encourage having something pre-prepared, such as a video or something, that is not a requirement. That still belongs to each council member. That is not changed. So all it takes is a request from an individual council member for their time, and they will have it. I just want to make that real clear. Okay. All right, then our last item is to review the agenda for our regular redevelopment agency meeting scheduled for October 6th. And who's going to do this, Mr. Isaac?
I guess I can. This is simply, let me get to it. This is the same thing that we just went through with the city. It's the budget opening for increased revenues. And again, it's just being able to show you what how those increased revenues are going to be spent. But I think that's all I need to say. Let me see.
It was just the 85,571, right?
Yep, one item.
Market Street, okay. Should be straightforward. So I'm sure the council will help me to remember that there's a meeting after council meeting next week. So with that, anything else that ought to be brought up? We don't have a need for a closed session, I don't believe. And so we're done with this meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Without objection, we will stand adjourned. Hearing no objection, we are adjourned. We will reconvene in our regular meeting at 6:30. Thank you very much.